Okay, so IGCSE settlements revision. So I'm just gonna break it down in a few different videos because otherwise it's gonna be too boring for you to watch. Also, the reason I'm putting it on YouTube is because at the end of the day, I think we're probably never gonna end up doing it at each other's houses, so let's just leave it this way. Okay, so first you need to know some definitions. So settlement, as you probably already know, it's the place where people live. So Monaco is our settlement. That's where we've settled down, we live here. Site is the actual location that a settlement is built on. So a settlement is like the general thing, but site is the place where it's built on, okay? So the floor, kind of. Situation, it's the area surrounding the site of a settlement. So it's just the thing you see around the site. Technically, the settlement. For instance, in Monaco, our situation is like all the mountains that are around us. So that's the situation. Okay, so this I've seen in past papers as a one-point question. It will say, what is an urban area? And you say it's a built-up area. Basically an area where there's been lots of buildings, so it's been built up, okay? Lots of people have built on it, lots of different services, etc. So a rural area would basically be the countryside. It's got like, it's basically everywhere that's not urban is rural. It's in the countryside, for instance, fishing places or anywhere in kind of rural France. You know what rural is. It's just kind of in the countryside, farming land, has one function only. Yeah, where farmers are basically. So rural, as we just said, settlements, there are settlements that are found in the countryside, like I just said, and they contain less than 10,000 residents, right? So they have less than 10,000 people living there. So that would make something a rural settlement. So an urban settlement is a settlement that has more than 10,000 residents. So Monaco, which has 38,000 or 34, I can't remember. Anyways, so it has more than 10,000, so it's an urban settlement. And then there are isolated buildings or isolated dwellings, which are made up of a single building, and it's normally a farm, right? So that's why it's all by itself in the world. So hamlets are a small group of houses, right? So it's a settlement with a few houses and not more than 10, right? And there are usually no services, so no cinema, no hospital, nothing. It's just mostly farmers or weirdos, like, I don't know, living there. I wouldn't want to live in a hamlet. So then there's a village, and it's a settlement of less than 10,000 people, but it's not rural. It's kind of, it's basically like a rural settlement, except that they have services, so it's not rural. For instance, a village, you know what a village is. You can find small shops, a little school, a little surgery place, and buses. Okay. Then an urban settlement, so like Monaco. A town, a settlement of over 10,000 people, but it's not a city. And a city is a large town. And in the UK, so in Britain, a town will become a city if it has a cathedral. So there's not like a huge difference between the two. It's just that one, it's like the government decided it's a city. But it's technically kind of the same shit. The capital city, you know what a capital city is of a country. But yeah, it always has the main administrative center, so like the governmental building, and yeah, it has the home of the national government. Yeah. In the primate city, it's the largest and most important city. It doesn't need to be the capital city. I mean, most of the time it is, but it doesn't have to be. For example, New York or Sao Paulo in Brazil or Sydney in Australia. You know, they're not the capitals, but sometimes it can be the capital. So, like in France, it would be Paris, which is also the capital. Okay. A conurbation is when two or more towns or cities join together to form like a huge thing, and that thing would be called a conurbation. And a megapolis is a conurbation or a clustering of cities with a population of over 10 million people, like Tokyo, for example. Okay, when you want to make a settlement, you have to find a certain place, and there are factors that you need to take into consideration. Firstly, the water supply. You need water, whether it is to clean, to wash shit, to drink, to do anything, doesn't matter, you need water. So you would want to find a settlement that's close to a river or an ocean or whatever. You also want fertile land so that you can farm, and this is very important so that you can make food and stuff. And also, if you really have fertile land and you have stuff like you make enough crops to eat and more, so there's a surplus, then you can sell it and you can make money. Now, this defensive position isn't as important as it used to be since we're not really going to fight anymore, but you should still learn it. You would want to find a good defensive position, so a place that's, for instance, encircled by a river so that no one can pass and fight or something. So yeah. Also, building materials. You want to be close to something where you can build, so trees, forest, because there's wood and you can build with that. Also, you want transport links so that you can leave and go, or just for tourism so people can come in or whatever. Transport links are important, so you want to be near to main roads or railways or something. Also, fuel. You want to be close to like coal or, I don't know, just anything for fuel so that you can use it, right? Or close to an electricity grid or whatever. Also, you want a good weather, so you wouldn't want to, say, have a settlement in Antarctica because it's just too goddamn cold. But you also probably, I mean, I know some people do, but you probably don't want to be in Africa because it's just too hot. So you want to find a place where the weather is stable, not only for your own comfortability, for your own comfort, sorry, but also so that you can build your crops, farm, because some plants will die if it's too cold or too hot. So you want to find good, stable weather. You also want to find a place which is good for trading. So you would want to be close to borders or something so you can trade with other people, with other countries. And resources, because obviously you can make money if you build, like whether it's lots of oil or diamonds or any sulfur rock, any shit, okay? Just for money. Okay, so when you have a settlement, there are usually patterns. So for rural settlements, there are multiple ones. So there's something called an isolated settlement. And it's basically a single building. So one building, as you can see here in this picture, I mean, there are two here, but consider it as one. And yeah, it's usually found in mountainous areas, as you can see, the mountains. Mountainous means in an area that has mountains, so it's mountainous. And usually, with isolated settlements, the single building that will be found there is usually a farmhouse. So this is like a huge farm, it's got lots of crops and shit. And this is the main farmhouse, like it'll have all the materials and crops and all, not crops, all the tools and shit. So an isolated settlement, it's a single building, normally found in a mountainous area, and it's normally the farmhouse of a large farm. Okay. The next pattern is dispersed settlements, and it's basically when individual buildings are separated by several hundred meetings, but it's still a settlement. But like there are many different houses, but they're separated. So think of it as kind of antisocial people. And but they're basically individual isolated buildings, but there are many of them. So that's the difference between the dispersed and isolated. They are basically isolated buildings, but not isolated settlements since there are lots of them. And since there are lots of them, they don't form a single settlement, so ignore that title. They don't form a single settlement. But it would be dispersed. Okay, so a linear settlement is one that grows in a line, but it doesn't necessarily need to be straight. In this picture it is, but you see, yeah, for example, linear settlements always follow roads, rivers, coasts, or valley floors. Here it follows a road, but so it's straight in this case, but if the road was like bending or something, then the houses would bend too. So that's a linear settlement. A nucleated settlement, think of a nucleus inside of an atom or whatever. It's very tight, right? So nucleated, it's when all the buildings in a settlement, they're nucleated, they're built close together, tight. And it's often around a church or a central village or like greenery, that kind of stuff. So for, like we just spoke about dispersion here, this one, when it's individual buildings that are separated, well, why would this happen? Well, firstly, if the area is mountainous, because it would be hard to build on and it's hard to build good transport links to, so not many people would want to live there. So there'd not be many people, and yeah, so it would be dispersed, little individual houses. Also, if the weather conditions are severe, people wouldn't want to be there if it's too hot or too cold. And also, If a site it's mainly farmland, then of course the settlement would be dispersed so that you have lots of space for your own crops, because if there are two farmers, they can't have their houses next to each other because they both need their own farms. Um, yeah. Also, if it's a floodplain or a coastal area which is vulnerable to flooding, well, it's dangerous, so not everyone would want to live there, so that's why it'd be dispersed. If there's only limited natural resources, another reason people wouldn't want it. If there are no job prospects, why would you want to go there if you can't get a job, so no money? There's usually no nearby schools and hospitals, no electricity, and no entertainment like cinemas, so that's for reasons why people wouldn't go there. So it would disperse. And then, like we just spoke about the nucleated, this one when it's all tight. Why would that happen? Well, if there are good transport links, so a road, a railway, or rivers, lots of people would go there. And if there's good fertile land, so awesome, farmers can go there and grow food. Also, if the land is flat, it's very easy to build on it, so lots of people are going to do this, so it'll be nucleated. If it's stable weather, that's good for growing crops, and if there are nearby natural resources like fuel, that's also great. The settlements would also nucleate if there are good job prospects, good schools and hospitals, good and reliable supply of electricity, gas, and water, and varied entertainment like cinemas, tennis courts, whatever, you name it. Yeah, and that's a reason why people would want to go there, so a settlement would become nucleated. Okay, so a function of a settlement is the job, purpose, or use. So just the services they offer, like why are they doing this? What a place does. So the larger the settlement, well, the more functions it will have usually. But functions can change over time. Some example of functions would be shopping, but we call it retail. Business, we call it commercial, farming, agriculture, housing, residential, educational, administration, well, administrative, which would be like the local or national government, tourism, and sport. Okay. So rural areas, they usually have less functions than urban areas because rural area means there are less people. So urban areas, which has more people, need more functions. The main purpose of settlements in rural areas, so where not many people are, it's usually agriculture, so to farm, and sometimes tourism, but it's usually farming, so agriculture. This is because they have less people, poorer transport, poorer communication, less technology, and the land is just better used for other purposes, like agriculture. For example, in rural areas, the fertility of the crop is super important because they're growing crops. And in urban areas, it's not. They can build anywhere. So even on some places where you can't have crops. So therefore, the land in rural areas is really fertile, so it's good to use it for crops, for agriculture. Okay, in urban areas, there are usually more functions, and they can range from shopping functions to educational functions to transport to administrative to even residential, just anything. Okay, and like I said before, the bigger the urban area, the more functions it normally has. So now we have our first case study. It's the growth of a function and settlement. So in the country El Salvador, which is in, I think, Central America, but it could be South America, but I'm not sure. But it's in the continent America. And we're going to look at the city San Salvador. So El Salvador is the country, San Salvador is the city. And in San Salvador, the most important function is business, but we would refer to it as commerce. San Salvador and its main function, commerce, have both grown because of a number of human and physical factors. So, the physical factors, firstly, flat land. Compared to the rest of El Salvador, the area around San Salvador is relatively flat, so it's easy to build offices and associated facilities like factories or whatever. So, yeah, flat land is important. Climate, again, compared to many other areas in El Salvador, the slightly higher climate of San Salvador makes the climate slightly cooler, making the working environment more bearable. So, right, they're talking in Fahrenheit, sorry, ignore that, because it's generally a bit less hot, so it's nicer for people to work there, okay? Because commerce, business needs people, so people would want to go there, because El Salvador is a super hot country. Okay, the site, well, it's located right in the middle of the country, which makes it very easy for businesses to trade through the place, and neighboring countries, which would be Honduras and Guatemala. Okay? Right, it's definitely in Central America, because, okay, it doesn't even matter. So, yeah, since it's located in a good place for easy trading, well, that's good. Also, the coast, it's only 40 minutes from the coast, which is called La Libertad, so liberty, and you need to learn these names because you get an extra point for case studies in the IGCSE when you name a place-specific reference. So they're 40 minutes away from the coast, and the coast is called La Libertad. La Libertad. Liberty, I guess you can call it that too, but better to call it La Libertad. Anyways, because it's so close to the coast, it's possible for businesses to trade by sea, which is always good. So then you've got human factors. So firstly, transport. The Pan American Highway, it's like a huge kind of road shit. It goes all through America, okay? So the Pan American Highway, it runs through San Salvador. So the trade with the rest of San Salvador and Central America is very easy since there's a road that crosses it. Also, El Salvador's, so the country's only international airport, is located just outside of San Salvador, so it's easy for transporting shit. Okay, education. So San Salvador also has some of the best international schools and universities, so this means that people there are trained and, there are skilled workers to work in business. So yeah. Also communications. San Salvador has the best internet connections and mobile phone network, so it's very easy for businesses to communicate and with customers and suppliers, so good communications. And the market, San Salvador is the biggest settlement in El Salvador, so businesses have a huge potential market to sell their products to, because there are lots of people. Okay, the workforce. Again, it has the largest population of any settlement in the country, so there are lots of workers, so yeah. And capital. San Salvador is home to the country's main banks, so it's easier for companies to raise capital. Capital is as in the money, right? Because the place has so many of the banks, they can easily raise capital. Okay, you got that? So that was our case study for San Salvador.